gonna take crackerjack timing, Wang.
Total concentration. You ready, Jack?
I was born ready.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and this video is a little later than I expected. Normally, we would expect the October's comic sales book numbers to actually come out like, I don't know, November 20th to November 25th, somewhere around there. But the numbers were delayed this week or this month because I guess John Jackson Miller over at Comichron was having to do some new techniques to come up with this analysis. So we finally do have some somewhat concrete numbers to look at, and we're going to run the gamut of comic book sales to retailers, comic sales to customers. Then we're going to go in and look at some of the graphic novel sales that are going to kind of back up the numbers that my partner in crime here has been talking about on his channel as far as long-term trends. Perch YT, the Poobah of comics himself. Perch, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, and I love digging into all these numbers. It's fun stuff.
Absolutely. So this is interesting, and we're gonna finally we can kind of have some concrete looks at some of the things that we've been told are happening, and I think we're gonna see that maybe things aren't exactly as people thought they were when it comes to the October sales. Now, before we get into all the details of this analysis, I do want to say if you're visiting for the first time, you haven't subscribed, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, give us a thumbs up if you enjoy this, give us a thumbs down if you don't. Either way, we want to hear your thoughts on the October comic sales. Is this exciting for you? Do you think these numbers are rock solid? Are you a little tripped? Do you think maybe they aren't quite as accurate as John Jackson Miller and Comichron are putting out? I definitely want to hear from you guys. Now let's get into it. This is the top 10 sales estimated sales through Comichron. Obviously, this just isn't Diamond. This is Lunar as well. And these are some big numbers. On the left here are the low-end estimations. On the right are the high-end estimations. Batman 3 Jokers number 3, 195 to 235 comic issues shipped. Now we go all the way down to 10. We're talking X-Men 13. That would have been the prelude to Ten of Swords, 90,000 to 100,000. These are huge numbers. And what's different about this, and we are going to compare some of this stuff to March, is you have a lot of big events going on right here. And you have some really key milestone comics. You've got Amazing Spider-Man 49 was ASM 850. Amazing Spider-Man 50 was another milestone. Batman 3 Jokers was wrapping up. Batman 100 wrapped into Joker War. Venom obviously is kind of leading into King in Black. X-Men was leading into Ten of Swords. So there's a lot of stuff going on in these numbers. So I do imagine the numbers should be inflated compared to what the last time we saw, like reliable numbers.
Yeah, I think these numbers are on the high side. I like what Miller is doing and trying to. I mean, he shows his math of how he's getting to this stuff, and I think he's making the best he can out of a lot of missing data. And so I think, I look at this and my feeling is that these numbers are inflated slightly, not by him, but just in general, they're inflated. But the overall ranking, I think, is probably pretty dead on. And I think that's where you can at least see what's what. I would suspect when all boils out, it's probably about 15 to 20% high, maybe on that end. But in general, I think the ranking is very solid, and I think it holds up. And you're right, there are a lot of anniversary issues and event issues and everything else in here, a lot.
Yeah, so we would expect the sales numbers to be higher than they would have been in March if the market had continued on as normal without the pandemic shutdown. Now, one of the things that we've been told is that the upper echelon, the upper crust of comic book sales have actually increased dramatically, which we kind of see here. But like the mid and lower tier comic sales had actually decreased once the industry came back from this shutdown.
Right.
And the numbers from Comichron don't really back that up. Here at the top, we have the top 10 comics. And the number one in March 2020 was Spider-Woman, 142,000. Batman 91 was number 2 at 88,000. Obviously, Batman wouldn't have cracked the top 10 in October of 2020. And, Spider-Woman would have come in at about number 5. So those numbers appear to be inflated, but we go down into the mid-tier, and from October, number 95 to 105, we're seeing the ranges are about 21,000 to 18,000 on the low end.
Right.
And we go over to March 2020, you would expect these to be higher than that because we were told in the mid-tier they kind of drop. It's actually, the range is about 18,000 to like 16,500. So it appears that the sales are even higher for October in the mid-tier. And then we go down to the bottom where we're going from 195 to 205, kind of centering around 200. The sales numbers are going like 7,800 down to 7,000. And for March, they're like 8,200 down to 7,500. So they're actually pretty close. It looks like the entire comic industry is inflated, according to these numbers.
It does. And that's why I think, I mean, we're all trying to guess at the data. I mean, we've heard from retailers that they're seeing softness in the middle and strength at the top, kind of what you referred to earlier. These numbers do paint a different picture. We also know some stores have closed or some stores aren't operating as well, and yet the numbers are up. So it's a little hard to tell exactly what's going on here. The other thing you mentioned earlier that I think fits into all this is a lot of the mid-tier titles in this bunch are also tied into events, and so there's a lot of variables that are being thrown to us in October. I think it's going to take another 2 months to really figure out exactly what's going on. But then again, when we're into November, December, a lot of places have returned to lockdowns and returned to some restrictive purchasing. We are into the holidays, so there's a lot of different factors coming in here. I think I'm going to hold to my belief that the top tier titles have seen a boost throughout this whole thing. The top 25% or so, they definitely have increased, maybe even increased significantly during this. And I think it's a combo of some big events and some big creators and some artists have come back onto those titles to kind of boost them up a little bit as we end the year. And I think the middle tier is going to be a much harder thing to analyze. I don't necessarily believe in the strength of the middle. Again, nothing against his numbers. There's a lot of different factors here. There's a lot of delayed books. There's a lot of things that are coming out here that are new. So, but if this picture is true, if it just holds up all down the line and his estimates are right, this is good news for comics. It is. That's great. It's for Western comics, more sales. That's super. I hope it's accurate.
Yeah, and we know that John Jackson Miller at Comichron.com, he does this because he has a passion for the industry. He is working with incomplete data sets, and he's doing the best that he can. And yet he's also always refining his process.
Yes.
So I would imagine, in a couple of months, his process is going to be even better, and maybe you'll see some of these windows kind of narrow down, and he might be able to get a better grasp on it. But I'm with you. I do think these numbers are inflated. It wouldn't make sense unless there were some shops out there that really had gone e-commerce and were ordering heavy to like ship on eBay.
Yeah,
that would be a lot of comics.
It would, and it would be. I mean, there's not the volume on eBay to necessarily reflect that. Like I said, John Jackson Miller is a solid guy. I mean, it is a passion of his. He is always refining his model. He doesn't make weird decisions, and he definitely has no allegiance to making the comics look better or worse. He kind of tells it like he is. He is a straight shooter. So, I trust his general ranking here, and I just think he's trying, like all of us, to figure out where these numbers are coming from and understand what's exactly happening. It is an interesting. It is an interesting projection, and I think it will be. I don't know. I'm curious to see where he goes with this model.
So we know that DC announced that Batman 3 Jokers #1 had shipped about 300,000 issues. This pegs the number 3 to be about 200,000. So it looks like perhaps, like on average, Batman 3 Jokers for all 3 issues ship like 225 to 250,000 issues for the first print run. So it's easily the best performing comic of 2020, just by average.
Absolutely. And I think when you tie in the trades, it's the one that's doing the best. I mean, it's new, but its initial numbers were higher. 3 Jokers is going to be DC's success story of 2020. I'm sure a lot of people at DC would have rather that been Death Metal, but it is going to be 3 Jokers. And it's also written like a Netflix series. It's written like you could easily convert that into an 8-part streaming special event show. And I think that's where Jeff Johns is putting his time. So, I mean, if you're at Warner Media right now, you're very happy with that book on all fronts of what it did and what it will do.
Yeah, so let's move on to the numbers from ICV2.com. These are from Comic Hub, the app that retailers can use. Not very many of them do,
Right.
but it kind of, you get an idea of what's actually being sold to customers. Like if you look at the Diamond numbers, or I'm sorry, John Jackson Miller's estimates at Comichron, like Venom was the number 5 shipped comic book, I think it was. But if you look at the actual sales, they're estimating is more like number 19 actually being sold to comics. So there is some discrepancies here, but mostly you're seeing the same comics.
Yeah, you are. I mean, it's a similar run. I think one interesting thing about Comics Hub is that it like you said, it has a very small group that goes in and uses it. It's not necessarily representative of the sample size of comics. It also tends to be, I don't know the best way to put this, similar retailers that get this, which generally similar buying behaviors. So while it's the same, I think you can see some differences. I do think Spawn is doing better, for example, in the mass market than what it shows here on Comics Hub. It's fallen a little further down here. I think some of the Marvel titles are doing a little bit better here than you saw in the other picture. In general, with the ranking, I think Miller's doing a better job. I suspect his is a lot more accurate. But it's good data. It's interesting to see how this all puts out. It just, people should. I've seen some people refer to this chart and going, "Oh, here's the reliable numbers we're all going to trust." It's like, well, this is 100 comic shops. This is not very, very dangerous small sample size.
Absolutely, and it's a service that's provided that easily probably gets used by word of mouth. So a group of friends kind of all use Comics Hub because they all know how to use it. Maybe in other regions, people aren't using it. So there's definitely some weird discrepancies. They also put out some charts or graphic novels. Obviously, the big one was Dracula MFer. I believe that was Alex DeCampi.
Right.
Really did very well. We're saying what's interesting in here is like you look at number 15, My Hero Academia, number 25.
Yeah.
You're like, oh well, it didn't perform all that well. Well, we're gonna say that's not true, but this is kind of what it looks like. Graphic novels selling through comic book shops.
Right.
Now let's look at the Bookscan numbers. Now, obviously, this is a much larger sample. This is, I believe, 16,000 stores, including e-commerce sites, and this is the top 20 Bookscan titles for adult graphic novels. That includes manga, superhero comics, and author comics, like self-published stuff. And you won't see a single superhero title on here. And
No.
You'll see My Hero Academia volume 25 is number 1.
Yeah, I mean, if you look down there at the publisher, you look at Viz is absolutely just destroying everyone else with this. And what's interesting, so Bookscan is a great location to go to because, as you mentioned, it has a great sample size. It is reliable stats. You combine that with what I was showing with the Amazon numbers, you find those two line up very similar in terms of what's selling and what's going on. But yeah, My Hero Academia is an absolute dominator in this space. And what's interesting here as well, what they don't necessarily show is these are the top selling titles for October. You see things like My Hero Academia Volume 1 and 2. Those have been in the market for a long time. Like, number 25 there is new. And so you'd expect it to be at the number 1 spot. But when you have a book, I think My Hero Academia has been in the market, I believe, like it published this way. I think it's at least 3 to 4 years. It's I think well over 1,000 days old in the market, and it's still clocking in there at number 2 and still beating everything else. I mean, we've had a lot of debates lately about YA coming from DC and the I Am Not Starfire book and all this kind of stuff, but none of those books are cracking this top 20. And based on what, if you start to go further down the list through Amazon, further out than that, I mean, they're probably not cracking the top 50 in a lot of cases. The only one that seems to be doing it is either Three Jokers, which is showing up in places, and the Marvel Encyclopedia, which is not a comic, but it is still in there. But yeah, this is, I mean, it is MHA's world at this point.
Yeah, so we'll break it out and we'll actually look at the 3 different categories. Over here on the left is you have the author graphic novels. You'll see stuff. There's Dark Horse, Dynamite, Image. The top 3, not typically publishers that we associated with Western comics. Top Shelf and Moral Gift.
Yeah.
We got the March Book 1 and March Trilogy or two of the three. Those showed up on that list. And then you go to manga, boom. The top 17 are on the list, and nothing from the list on the right, which is the superhero graphic novels, your DC Comics, Marvel kind of stuff. Doomsday Clock, complete collection. I believe that was isn't that the first time that they did that graphic novel?
I think so. This is a complete collection.
Yeah, I thought it was like a special edition.
Yeah, I think there's another one that they have done. Yeah.
So, but you can look at the DC must have done some type of Batman special. Because if you look at the book scans for Batman, Batman's like 12 of the top 20 titles. It's absolutely insane. So it is Batman's world, but once you start opening it up to the entire market, he doesn't even crack the top numbers. It's crazy.
No, it's right now. If you're looking at some of these places, you're seeing My Hero Academia dominating. You're seeing Demon Slayer come up the line, doing very, very well. The interesting thing too is if we're talking global, and for a long time we said, global doesn't matter. We're talking about the U.S. But as DC has said more and more that they want to play globally, that's why they've made a lot of their changes and why they're doing what they're doing. You start to add in things like the Japan book numbers and some of these other regions, and nothing is close. Like the Western comics are not cracking into Japan and into Europe like manga is. So, whether you're a fan of manga or not, I'm not here to kind of wave a flag like manga is the best thing everybody should be paying attention to. It is absolutely dominating, with the exception of one title, with one property. It dominates this space completely.
Now, there's another market both DC and Marvel are trying to get into, and that's kids graphic novels. Obviously, there is a Bookscan report on that one as well. And you'll see a lot of Dav Pilkey and Raina Telgemeier on this list.
Yeah.
I think Dogman is 5 of the top 6 selling comic graphic novels. There's a Class Act is in there as number 3. But you'll see nothing from DC. You see nothing from Marvel. And they're not even close to cracking this market yet.
No, and if you look at the total volume of sales, I mean, Dogman is hilariously dominant to the point that I went on a crazy path just trying to figure out the net worth of Dav Pilkey. It's hard to find. It's like if somebody can, get recent data, you'll see stuff up from like 5-10 years ago. But at this point, from what I can tell, at least from data from 3 or 4 years ago, I mean, the guy could buy most of the indie publishers at this point. If you're other than Marvel and DC, he could probably buy them outright. It's pretty insane, the strength of this book. And granted, it's not the audience, I'm sure, of most of the people who are watching this video. However, what Dogman does tell us is that, and why Marvel and DC are struggling to get into this market, is this is the next generation that are going to read comics. They're coming in, they're getting their first taste of kind of sequential art and all the rest this way. And so the question becomes, when they age and they age out of Dogman, where are they going to go? Are they going to go toward Marvel? Are they going to go toward DC? Are they going to go toward manga? And if you go to a bookstore right now, I mean, the answer is pretty clear where they're going. I mean, I think we're seeing that path go, and that should terrify the big two at this point.
But a lot of people want to tell you, comic sales are growing. We're doing great.
Yeah,
they are growing.
They absolutely are.
What we consider the traditional Western comic market, and what we mostly cover here on my channel and your channel as well. Definitely near and dear to your heart. And I will say this about Dogman: it's well earned. I was at a bookstore with my wife, and I was looking. I was like, man, our 5-year-old would love this book. I got him the Superman comic anyway, just hoping. But when I was looking at it, like he would love it. The art's perfect for a kid that age.
It knows its market. I mean, that's the thing. If you think about what Marvel is doing, what DC is doing, and the audience that they're trying to chase, it's obviously a different audience. But what Pilkey's doing with Dogman is he's making a book that fits the age that's going to pick it up. You open it up, it's a solid. It fits, and he knows his market, and he's supplying it. But you made the very accurate point earlier. I hate this battle of, is a comic industry growing, not growing? Absolutely, it's growing. It's unquestionable it's growing. But The definition of comics is the key word. It's comics.
Comics is the definition growing as well. Yeah.
The definition is growing. Exactly. It's stuff like this. It's YA. It's manga. You throw those things in there, the industry is doing great. But if you're using that as an excuse to say that everything that's going on in Western comics, big two comics, is perfect, that story is absolutely not true.
100% correct. So I hate to throw fuel on the Perch fire. You've been letting off a lot of truth bombs, but we have to be honest here. The numbers do not lie. The rankings do not lie.
No.
Western comics, as far as graphic novels, and we know DC and Marvel want to do that because that's where the sales growth is. They're not there yet.
No, they've had no success there, and I know that one of the narratives was for a while that all the sales are in digital. We don't see them, but that's where all the growth is. And then it's kind of changed to all the sales are in trades. But if you go and you pull the numbers of trades and what we saw just now from you, the trades aren't moving at any higher percentage than they were 5-10 years ago. It's not growing. I've now looked at multiple series on my channel, and the trades are flat. So that's not where the audience is going. The only thing that is spiking up, that has that hockey stick up of growth, are things that are not Marvel and not DC. And that is supplying a lot of growth to the comic industry, but it is largely a flat line. Now we'll see again with what Miller's doing. Maybe it's tipping up the end of the year, but we'll see.
So if I were to be completely honest, I would say Image would be closer to cracking the code than DC and Marvel at this point.
Yeah, I think so. I think that Image has a greater possibility of kind of playing in these other spaces in a successful way. What's weird about DC, and it's I'm talking a little bit now without being fully informed on it, but DC did this little book Primer, which was a kid's YA type graphic novel, OGN. It's a brand new character, nothing related to the DC universe, and that book is performing better than pretty much any other book that they've put out in that space. If you think about kind of global numbers, also what's holding up month after month. It's been out for a while and it's holding up. And I think there's a lesson there, which is, hey, maybe don't take, Bruce and put him in a weird love triangle with the Joker and Catwoman and try and, give this other take on that series. You're going to have a hard time selling that to this new audience. They already know who Batman is. They don't want to see this very different version of Batman. If you come out with a brand new character, you make it fun, you apply it to kids or YA or whatever, you have a much higher chance of success. I think the numbers prove that out. But what's weird is Marvel and DC seem determined to want to take their existing character base and do these different takes on them.
Transform them to the market.
Yeah, which is, I think, a proven failure at this point. It's not going anywhere. And they just want to keep trying again. So Image doesn't have that problem. We don't see YA teen angst Spawn or any of that kind of stuff. I guess Savage Dragon's trying to transform itself to an adult market, but other than that, you don't see that. And so I think Image probably has a greater hope of success. That said, Image is also staffed by a lot of the same people mentality that are making the decisions in the big two. So who knows?
Mm-hmm. But we can say this: Batman 3 Jokers, as far as a comic book goes, the bestseller of 2020. If you just look at, started out at 300, probably ended around 200, maybe 175, somewhere in there. But it did damn well. It did really good.